Welcome to Stories of Brisco and Bradshaw. I would be Bradshaw. That would be your Chickasaw native, your Chickasaw Hall of Famer, Mr. Gerald Brisco, Oklahoma's favorite son. And we got a treat today. We got former women's champion. We got the valet to the stars, from Dusty Rhodes to Magnum TA to Tully Blanchard to Gino Hernandez. She did it. She has done it all. She is Baby Doll, and she is from God bless Texas. Baby Doll, Nicola Roberts, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much for having me. An honor and a privilege that you finally got around to asking me on your show.
Well, I've been wanting you forever. It was Mr. Brisco because he's from Oklahoma and he
I
doesn't
see.
like Texas. And so he said, no, we can't have more Texas people. So I've been wanting you forever because I have a huge crush on you.
I completely understand the Oklahoma thing, so we're good. We're good. But see, we're like this. Oklahoma and Texas are like this.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, welcome aboard. I was fortunate to run into you up in where was it?
In Ohio. Yes, in Ohio.
Chillicothe, Ohio.
hmm
And,
What an awesome show. Sell out to the rafters.
Yeah.
The reason why we love professional wrestling.
Exactly. The fans up there are just tremendous and everything. But I ran into you, and when I saw you, I said, I hadn't had her on a podcast yet. Why?
Mm-hmm.
And I had to be JBL reason, because I always invite the beautiful women on our podcast to share some time with us. But seeing you up there, I mean, I started doing a little research and everything. And I before that, I didn't know that you were Nick Roberts' daughter, and you're Lubbock, Texas. I actually worked with your dad and your mom out in the olden days of Dory Funk there. The Funks had to be a great inspiration. That had to be something growing up and seeing Terry Funk grow up at the same time, basically, right?
Terry Funk is the reason I love professional wrestling. I actually was fortunate enough to see some of his very first matches. I was probably like 4, 5, maybe 6 years old whenever he first started. My dad promoted in Lubbock, so that meant every Saturday afternoon my dad was promoting our show for the following Wednesday. And I grew up with Terry and Dory as like my heroes. And then Dick Murdoch came along, and Dusty Rhodes and Manny Fernandez and Tully, and then the Von Erich. So I was very, very fortunate. I love professional wrestling, and I was just born into the perfect family for it.
Well, tell us a little bit about your mom and dad. I mean, we hit on the fact that they were a promoter, but they were both outstanding in the ring too. So you had that, the third generation type?
Well, I'm second generation. Now my daughter is third generation, Samantha Starr, and she's the only female in the whole world that's third generation on both sides of her family, which means that her mom and her dad and 3 out of 4 grandparents were professional wrestlers. Jake the Snake is also her brother-in-law. Rockin' Robin is her aunt. Sam Houston is her dad. Baby Doll is her mom. So I mean, she was born into it. My mom and dad wrestled in the 50s and early 60s. My dad continued into the 70s because with the promotion, they'd build up the angle where he'd be like a special referee or a special tag team partner up until even the 70s. But my mom and dad were mainly in the 50s. They worked everywhere, really all over the world. My mom went to Australia twice. She went to Mexico several times. I did a little bit of research, and someone can maybe correct me on this, but in 1954, my mom was in the very first mixed tag team with her then husband. Oh my gosh, his name was Mario Sarpolis, I think his name was. And they wrestled a mixed tag against, I forget the names, but she was in the very first mixed tag team in 1954.
Wow, that's history.
And then that with the female wrestlers, because I look at my mom as like a pioneer, because in the 50s, the women were just starting to get into the workforce and have jobs and careers like outside of the home, because before that, with the world wars going on and just the development of the colonization of the United States, women were in the home with the children. Well, in the 50s, it was kind of the breakout, like the war had ended, the World War II had ended. There was a lot of money, a lot of freedom. And for my mom to have her own car, her own money, travel the world on her own, man, that's trailblazing right there.
That is.
Do you know where the match was, 1954?
I could look it up. I think it was in Iowa, but I'm not sure. Shirley Strimple, I believe Shirley Strimple was the late, because she was like the wrestling housewife, and it was actually really funny because it was my mom was married to her tag team partner at the time, and they wrestled another married couple.
Wow.
That was probably for the Deucics, right?
I believe so. Yes. Oh no, Billy Wolf. She wrestled for Billy Wolf, but in Iowa it would have been for the Deucics. Yes.
So how did the promotion happen down in Lubbock? How did that all get started?
Sled Allen was a promoter, and he was looking to get out of it. And my mom and dad were together, and my mom was pregnant with me at the time, and I guess it was just like perfect timing of like buying into a promotion, something that was available, like the next step to the relationship, because my mom having a baby can't really be on the road anymore. So they had like a trailer in the trailer park, and bought into the promotion, then bought Sled Allen's house. We actually bought his house, and then just took over the promotion. And my dad promoted either in Fair Park or the Civic Center for over 20 years. It was almost 23 years. And that was weekly. That was every single week except for Fair Week. And if like Christmas was on like a Wednesday or whenever we had the show, we probably took that week off.
What day of the week was it? Wednesday that you ran?
It was Wednesday. It was every Wednesday for, oh my gosh, probably right at 18 years. And then when we went with World Class wanted us to go to Friday. So we went with Friday night.
Now we're working with the Funks and everything. How involved was your dad with Dory Sr. and of course Dory Jr. and Terry?
It was like hand in glove. I remember Dory Sr. driving down to my dad's house and sitting at the kitchen table and discussing business and angles and who was coming in and what they were going to do with them and everything like that. And it was kind of like the closed meeting, like all the doors in the house were shut, and like the partition, we had one of those Dutch doors that would cut off between the kitchen and the dining room. They would slide that shut, and they'd smoke cigarettes and drink coffee. It was very like, it was
Mafia.
Like Godfathers, maybe like mafia.
After
So
while.
when your dad was booking Wednesdays, was he working? Was he booking other nights as well, or was that enough? Was that that all he could do?
No, Wednesday was our town, because we also had like I want to say Sunday was Albuquerque with London. His last name was London.
Right.
Then Monday was Gory Guerrero in El Paso. Tuesday was Odessa or Abilene with the Lawman. Wednesday was Lubbock. Thursday was Amarillo. I think Friday might have been Clovis. And then Saturday was like another New Mexico town maybe. But they said riding the bicycle, because every night you were at a certain town and you would be booked and then you go to the next one. Well, with Amarillo, it was close enough where you're like maybe 200 miles, which like you're further. Well, no, I take that back. El Paso would have been the longest trip, and that was like 300. So it wasn't bad. It was, the roads weren't excellent, but, you really could be home just about every night.
The lawman introduced Mr. Briscoe's brother to the governor of Texas one time in Abilene.
Oh, wow. The Von Erichs, Don Slatton's wife hated the Von Erichs. Just, I don't know what she didn't like about the boys, but so she didn't want to get them booked. And it was like, man, they were money, but I guess they were kind of headache. Well, Kevin had found a huge snapping turtle on the side of the road and brought it into the dressing room. Well, she's getting mad because she's going, get this dadgum turtle out of here. Why is this turtle in here? And she kicked at it. Well, it snapped at her and got her on the side of the foot and got her big toe. And so she's cooking this turtle all over the dressing room and cursing the boys. So, yeah, she was a trip.
So you go ahead.
The lawman Don Slatton pulled one of the best ribs of all time on Mr. Briscoe's famous brother Jack, and
okay.
Terry Funk.
What it was?
Terry Funk begged Jerry.
Dolph Briscoe, right? Governor Dolph Briscoe was.
That's
governor
right.
You remember that name?
Yes.
And so he was governor during Jack's title reign there. So Jack, of course, had done a week there in Amarillo territory, and he's wanting to get back home to Florida, wanting to get out of Texas like we all do, They wanted Jack to do an interview for Harley Race, who was coming in, and a live interview. Jack on a TV sports show or something like that. Jack did not want to do it. Of course, he wanted to get home. So they come up with this game. And Jack had mentioned, hey, you guys finally got a Brisco as governor of Texas. Things in Texas will straighten up, and be right and everything. So Jack made his reservation to get out of Texas, and so Junior called him and said, hey, Jack, the governor's coming through Texas. We mentioned to one of his aides that you would like to meet him, that you're a Brisco and all this stuff, world champion. The governor jumped at the opportunity, of course, to meet you, Jack. Would you stick around a couple hours just to meet the governor? So Jack said, sure, I want to meet Governor Brisco. So, of course, that's how they talked Jack into it. So how it turned out, Don Slatton, I knew this car salesman that looked just like the governor. So they put this guy into a limousine with a convoy, a couple of fake cars in front and behind them, and chased Jack down. Jack pulled off the road and all that stuff, and got out of the car. Jack is Governor Brisco, Jack Brisco, all governor. I mean, and it was all a rib. The guy was a used car salesman. They did it just to keep Jack in.
Oh, Lord.
Jack was so furious. Even Harley was afraid to go in the dressing room that night. So they gave me the cue here. Come here, all the way over. And I said, of course, you know about the governor. I said, yeah, I know about the governor. And he said, then they told me that it wasn't really the governor. It was just some guys they just had portraying the governor. I said, and they said, we don't want to tell Jack, but we got to tell him because we don't want to find him out. Hardy said, please don't tell him right before he goes to the room. He'll be so mad he'll think I'm involved in it. So okay, well, I'm going to tell him now. So they all run out of the dressing room, including Harley and Dory and Terry. They're all run out of the dressing room. As Jack, the governor, you met. Oh yeah, he's a nice guy. I said, Jack wasn't the governor of the used car or something. Jack turned bright red. He was ready to kick everybody's ass in the village.
And of all things, a used car salesman. Of all
exactly.
Things, of all the gimmicks.
But yeah, that's Don Slatton, probably the greatest rib Jack ever had pulled on. Probably the only rib Jack ever had pulled on.
Yeah.
So
Nicola, where did your dad work? And your mother also was she part of the whole thing with Mildred Burke and that whole crew back then?
I don't know how much he worked against Mildred. I'm going to say Donna Castanello, Debbie Combs. She worked a lot against Debbie Combs. Worked a lot Minnesota, Florida. My dad worked a lot in Florida and worked Mid-Atlantic for the Crockett's. It was like the 50s. They worked everywhere. I mean, that was the whole thing. If you were successful, you worked everywhere because you worked 3 or 4 months in one territory and then move and then go to another territory. And then she also, in like the late 50s, was able to hook up with, oh my gosh, I can't remember, Penny Banner. And they had the really very successful tag team with her for several years.
Johnny Weaver's wife, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it had to be a great time because that's when, right after World War II was when the TV came along and wrestling, got that huge spike. Of course, Gorgeous George was made for television, and you just Georgie sets. They said he sold so many TV sets.
Well, and then they had I noticed a TV Guide article where my mom had she was on a wrestling show right before Gunsmoke on like Wednesday or Monday night or something. So what a time slot, right? To have Monday right before Gunsmoke.
And was TV based out of Lubbock at all, or was it always just a house show?
It was always a house show. We didn't do TV that much because Amarillo, we did they had a TV studio set up for Saturday afternoon. So they would do their TV matches Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, do the promos, then get all the tapes ready and ship them out for the following week. And that's what we would go on, was the Amarillo that just had the studio matches.
And how far did World Class Championship Wrestling, I guess it was big time wrestling back then with Fritz when took over. How far did it get toward Lubbock? Did they ever run Lubbock as well?
Oh, World Class did. That's how I met the Von Erichs. I was in high school whenever my dad switched over, because when Terry and Junior sold out to, I believe it was Merced Solis, I'm not sure, they weren't as serious about wrestling. And back then, that was my dad's income. I mean, that's what he did. He promoted shows. So if it was just going to be kind of a part-time thing and not really a money making, then that's when he went with World Class. And that's World Class was just on the satellite. And whenever they went worldwide, they were the first promotion to go worldwide with a satellite. And we ran for, I want to say, about 5 years with World Class.
What years was that? Do you remember?
Let me see. I would have been 15 to 24, maybe. So 15 would have been 80. Let me see. 75.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I grew up in Sweetwater, and we got mostly the Von Erich television.
Right.
When the boys were debuting. I'm 57, born in 66. So
before we came on the air here, you and I were talking about, growing up and everything. I was telling you about my nightmare overstay with Don Slatton in his house, where his daughter had like 200 little Barbie dolls. You said I was an outside girl. So you were very athletic growing up. You actually have some school records or Texas State records in the discus, and you had a mystery coach there that kind of helped you, gave you some deals, and being one of the Von Erich boys, correct?
Right. I was very fortunate. My senior year of high school, I was I lettered in soccer, volleyball, and basketball, and I had like all the letters on my jacket and the medals, and yeah, it was pre-decorated out. But my last year in soccer, or in track rather, I did discus and shot put. And I actually set my school record with a discus, and I attribute it all to Kerry Von Erich. He helped me just with my hand, and to just, instead of just throwing it, to actually like use your little finger, and that extra little push, I got like 5 extra feet and broke my school record. Awesome. So that was pretty cool.
And correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't remember exactly, but Kerry was, of course, almost world class, or maybe world class discus thrower, but he broke a Southwest Conference record that was Fritz's record, right? Because Fritz had the record first. I
believe so, right. I know he broke the discus record. I didn't know it was Fritz's, and then he was slated to go to the Olympics, but that's when Carter had banned it because of the Russians or something, so they didn't get to go.
Yeah, and because Kerry, I think that's right, because Fritz was obviously a tremendous athlete as well, and Kerry was, oh my God, world class.
Oh, yeah. And everyone that kind of puts down Fritz of like, well, Fritz wasn't good with his boys, and Fritz was mean, and Fritz was a tyrant, and the whole thing. Fritz had 5 very active young boys that he was taking care of on a big ranch, and it was just them. And of course, you have to kind of keep control, because I have one boy. I have 9-year-old. I couldn't imagine having 5 of them. So yes, you have to have control. And Fritz, I will swear to this day, only wanted the very best for those boys. And that's all he wanted, was the very best and yes, he probably made mistakes. We all make mistakes, but he never was malicious, and he was never mean to those boys. And it's none of them got punished unless they really deserved it.
Well, we had Bill Colville on here. Remember Bill with the cowboy hat security?
Mm-hmm.
Bill
it was security like forever. Yes.
Forever. That's right. Bill said the same thing. That Fritz, in his estimation, is exactly like you said. He thought Fritz was very caring with the boys. The perception is always, you look kind of back in history and want to blame somebody, especially when you have all these tragedies. Sometimes maybe there's nobody to blame. Maybe sometimes tragedies just happen. That was kind of Bill's take on it, but that Bill said that Fritz was not the father that was kind of portrayed later in life toward the boys. He was very good with the kids.
He was. And when you've got 5 boys, and then you're not going to raise heathens, you're not going to raise people that, those Von Erich boys are over. No, those boys were always very well mannered. They were yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, just really good kids. And then also having a boy now, boys just do stuff and ask for forgiveness later. They don't care. So Fritz knew that. And like with boys, you have to rein them in and keep control. Otherwise, they're going to run roughshod over everybody. But the boys were very well mannered. They were very well behaved. Yes, tragedy happens, and that's family, it happened a lot.
A lot, too many times. Growing up, were you? Did you ever, since your mom and dad were so active in the business, did you ever look at the business and say, "This is what I want to do," or would you grow up and say, "Man, I don't want to be a part of this business"?
Oh, from day one, it was destined. I was going to get in somehow, some
Somehow.
way. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Well, when you're like calling the cable company to find out whenever wrestling is going to be on, whenever you're finally going to get TBS wrestling at 6:05, and you're calling every month to find out if your house is actually ready for cable yet.
Wow.
I did that. And then I've scheduled work hours so that I could be home watching wrestling. And in Lubbock, it was 5:05. So 5:05, I'm watching wrestling. And then at 11 o'clock, it was WOR from New York. My mom walked by one time and she said, "Why are you watching wrestling?" I said, "Because I love it, Mom. I just love it." And she just kind of shook her head and walked away like, okay, whatever.
So you weren't encouraged, but you weren't discouraged either. I mean, when did they know your passion?
Oh, they probably knew. See, I was going to school at the time. I was going to be EMT, and then I was going to be a paramedic and go to Colorado and be a ski patrol. That was kind of my main goal at the time. And I wanted to live in the woods because I feared if you worked for the Park Service, you could go wherever you wanted to in the park whenever you wanted to. You know what I'm saying? You had kind of like the access to all the cool parts. So that was in my idea what I wanted to do. So whenever the deal for Gino came up, my parents were not real happy because I had to quit school. I had 4.5 years of college, and they should have known something was up because I didn't have a major. I didn't have a minor. I was just kind of taking classes. And, as long as I got my 18 semester hours every semester, I figured I was doing well. But
And it's a really cool story too. You overheard your mom and dad discussing they were looking for a valet for Gino at the time, and you
yes.
overheard the conversation. You went in your bedroom, I guess, and picked up your phone and called the Amarillo office, and you happened to get hold of a friend, right? Is that
Well, I didn't see. I was sneaky because I knew if I called from my house, they would be able to trace a phone call and go, "Nicola, why are you using the phone?" So I snuck off to a boyfriend's house and used his phone. And I had my dad's black book, and I called the number for Dallas Sportatorium that was
the old
underneath it.
black book that had everybody's name and number in it.
Exactly, exactly. And it had Dallas Sportatorium in there. No name with it, just Dallas Sportatorium. And David Manning answered the phone. And I knew David because I'd sold merch for the Von Erichs for years. So I knew
you
David.
guys had already merged the territory then with your
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I'd sold pictures and T-shirts for the Von Erichs through David for probably 4 or 5 years up until then. And so whenever I called him, it was like, "Hey, David, I heard my parents talking, and you guys are looking for a girl for Gino, like a bodyguard, and man, I might be perfect for it," and he loved the idea, and it was just he was going up to a meeting with Fritz because Fritz's office was above the regular offices. He says, "I'm getting ready to go upstairs and have a meeting." And Fritz says, I'll shoot it by him and see what he says. He said, "I'll call you right back." So I waited, about a half hour, 45 minutes later, he called back and he is ecstatic. He said, "Fritz absolutely loves the idea. He loves it that you already are in the business. We don't have to smart anybody up. You're already right here. We're going to get you started."
And jumping in, how smart were you to the business at that? Did you know
Oh,
everything?
no. See, that was just it. It was so protected back then. I mean, I had an idea. I'd seen thousands of matches and the whole thing, and I kind of had an idea, but it wasn't until the very night that I worked, whenever I was in San Antonio, Texas, at the Joe Harry Coliseum.
Wow.
It was Gino Hernandez and Ken Mantell, and Stella was in there, and Mike. I want to say there was, and I think Gary Hart might have been in there. And they give me they give me the whole thing of what they want me to do. And there's like 7 things that I've got to be like right on point and doing the right thing. And they tell me, and so they said, "Are you good with that?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they said, "Do you know what we want you to do?" And I said, "Look big and tall, like I can kick somebody's ass." They were like, "That's exactly what we want." So whenever they left, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that's how they do it." That's the dance. I had no clue. And
Wow.
to this day, I don't think that they knew that they smartened me up at all.
So when you first got there, what happened? I mean, had you met Gino before?
Oh, I'd known Gino for forever. I had a huge crush on him since I was like 15. So this was like the perfect time. I had the perfect job. I was going to make money. I was going to hang out with wrestlers. I was going to travel. It was, I was on cloud nine, top of the world, like the Titanic and the front of the ship.
Yeah.
The world is mine, and here I am.
And when did your mom and dad find out?
Oh, I had to tell him like right after when David had called me, he says, the only problem is that who's going to tell your folks? He says, we're not telling your dad. I was like, well, I guess if I'm going to be a big girl, this is a time to go. So I had to put my big girl pants on and go.
And
Was your dad
They weren't happy.
Was your dad one of these old school tough guys?
I'm sorry?
Was your dad like one of these old school tough guys?
Oh, yes. He had John Wayne. He had a John Wayne poster on his wall. He made his own guns. I mean, he would get the burl oak and actually carve out his own gun stocks and make his own guns and go shoot them. And
Wow.
like once a year, he'd come back. He'd go to Colorado and bring an elk back. He'd shoot an elk and put it on the front of the truck and drive all the way home. And yeah. Oh, my dad was the man's man. But he was a good guy.
So how did it go when you
tell us
told him?
about that conversation when you told him, man?
A lot of disappointment, a lot of like shaking their heads. And then it was just like, see, I know she was going to do this. I knew from the very start. I don't know why we wasted all this time in college when she wasn't going to do what we wanted to anyway. And it was just like, and it was pretty much, if you're going to go do it, be successful at it. And just remember, we're watching you. So I think they held me to a higher level than I even held myself, because I had to go back and answer to my folks. So if I was acting up around the boys and not being a lady and not withholding the reputation that my dad had, then I would have definitely heard about it.
Did David Manning know that you weren't smart to the business?
No. No one knew. And that was part of the spiel. Whenever I talked to him, I said, well, I'm pretty and I'm smart and I think I'd fit like what you're doing. Well, I meant smart, like book smart, because I was in college. I was 22 years old. I knew everything.
That's great.
So you'd never taken a bump or anything, right?
No, we were not allowed in the ring. We wanted to go play in the ring, but that was like church to my dad. We did not play in the ring. We didn't take bumps in the ring. We didn't we could sweep the ring out, but that's all we could do, because that was my dad's business. It wasn't happy, fun playtime. There was no ring set up in the backyard where people could play and have fun. This is how my dad made a living for like 25 years, promoting and stuff.
So when you wanted to be something in the business, what were the options? I mean, because, you kind of went through periods of where you had kind of a women's division. Now, obviously, you have this women's division that is just as equal or better than the men's division, which is how it should be. But it took a long time to get there. And at times, there wasn't many women to wrestle. What did you want to be when you were in high school looking at the business? What did you want to be?
Well, what's really interesting is whenever my mom was wrestling, there were only 48 professional wrestlers in all of the United States. Only 48 girl wrestlers and all working in the 50s. And so when you look at now, there's literally probably a couple thousand. So it's grown a lot. Back in the mid 80s, you were the only real choice was to be a wrestler. They didn't really have the valet roles set up. Like Sir Nelson Royal had a girl. Nelson Royal worked with the girls quite a bit. And then Gorgeous George had a girl. Miss Linda had just started. I think she was about 2 years before me. And Nancy Sullivan had just started in July, and I started in September. So girls were just starting to be a part of the outside, but I was definitely one of the very first to be on the outside of the ring and have the roles that I did. Otherwise, you were a wrestler. And with my size, I mean, like 5'10", 190, 200 pounds, there weren't really, the girls were not my size. So I didn't really want to wrestle because I didn't want to put over little girls.
Yeah, you're right. You're looking back on it. Even in there with your mom, there weren't a lot of really big girls,
Mm-mm.
in the business.
My mom was 5'7" and like 140, 145 pounds. And see, I'm like 5'10", almost 5'11".
Yeah. So this was
Mr.
a
Briscoe,
perfect role.
Mr. Briscoe, you once lost to a little girl, didn't you? Didn't you lose the 24-7 title to Kelly Kelly?
Well, I lost to Kelly Kelly, and I also lost to China. So
Well, that's true. One.
one of the prototypes there also. But yeah, but when you got into the business, were you aware of Gino's reputation and his party and all
I
that?
I kind of knew I knew about the club in Houston. I had grown up hearing that Paul Bosch was his dad. The whole thing, like he was like in the business because of Paul. What's really crazy is to see the Dark Side of the Ring episode and learn so much about him when literally known Gino for 10 years before that. I didn't know that he was married and had kids and the double. He didn't live a double life. He had like 3 and 4 different lives
Wow.
going on at one time. He really did.
There's so much mystique around Gino. How was he to be around?
Whatever you saw on TV, that was him. The flamboyant, the arrogance, the brand new red Corvette, the money, the girls. He literally carried that picture of Farrah Fawcett in the frame with him for 4 years. Every time I saw him, he had that picture of Farrah Fawcett.
Why? Why was he carrying a picture of Farrah Fawcett?
I guess he had like a meet and greet with her. He had gone out to, I want to say he went to California, but I'm not sure exactly where.
She's a Houston. She's a Houston. I think she grew up in Houston.
Like a Houston socialite. They were at some socialite gala type thing, and he got the picture taken with her, like giving her roses.
Yeah.
And so forever he was carrying that picture around like they were engaged for some reason. It really was kind of funny.
Did you enjoy being around him?
I thought I would, but no, it was when you find out that he's got like an 18-year-old girlfriend and here he is like almost 30. And he's got her engagement ring and it's just seemed kind of creepy. He was good to work around, but I really liked being around Jake a lot more. I had just met Jake. Jake actually held the door open to the TV studio when we first went in and did promos for the very first time. I did more road trips with Jake, and I attribute Jake to helping me be a heel and helping me take my wanting to be in the business even further up the line. Because, talk about like having someone to do a road trip and just listening to stories and how to work. I was blessed from the get-go that Jake was right there for me.
You said something there that's so important that JBL and I talk about a lot with a lot of our guests. Being a heel. Is that where you wanted to be? You wanted to be a full-born heel because a lot of times, especially in ladies, they don't want to be heels. They want to be the pretty girl. They want to be the one that folks cheer. But you thrive being that bad girl.
Oh, I love being a heel. I am a heel at heart. I love making my husband mad just because I can. It's just who I am.
So you mentioned Jake, and I agree with everything you said. I'm sure Mr. Briscoe does as well. One of the best heels of all time, one of the best minds of all time. It was Jake's a different level as far as his ability to be able to work and so many things as far as the business. My question is about Gino. Everybody always talk about how Gino was such a great heel. Did you consider Gino a great heel when you were with him?
Oh, yes. Well, Gino was always a heel. I'm trying to think if he ever turned babyface, but I don't think he ever was a babyface. So he's one of the few gimmicks that stayed true to who he was. I could never see Gino not being a heel because he had that arrogance and that I am so much better than you attitude that just rubbed off in real life. I mean, Gino would have been a great fourth horseman. If they needed that spot filled, he would have fit in really well, I believe.
So was Gino Paul Bosch's son?
No, found out that Gino's mom was a rat. Oh my gosh. Who would have thought? I mean, she was like front row Houston fooling around with all the boys. So yeah, learn that one from Dark Side.
So most of your knowledge, and you didn't really was come from the dark side, just like the rest of us, then, right?
Right. With Gino, I did because Gino was very mysterious. Gino would like leave the show and you never knew where he went, where he was at. He didn't like party with the boys. He went off and did other stuff. He had the gambling thing going. He had the drug thing going. He had girls. He had a lot going on.
So the 18-year-old girl that he was engaged to, was that in addition to his wife?
Yes.
Wow.
I'm saying he gave her a ring.
Oh, I saw her. She had the huge diamond ring, and she had a white 300ZX. So I liked Gino so much that I went out and bought a black 300ZX.
And Gino, he never got caught?
Oh, I'm sure he did. I'm pretty sure that his wife knew and the whole thing. But what are you going to do if sometimes you love someone so much that you don't change them. You just put up with what little they give you.
That's what I do with Mr. Brisco. Despite how mean he is to me.
Oh Lord.
So a question, because I've asked several guys who knew Gino really well, including Michael Hayes, Bill Colville, and a bunch of guys, from that era. To a man, and I haven't asked any women, so it's to a man. They all say that Gino did not OD, that he had help dying. What is your take on it? Your belief about Gino?
I think Gino got caught up with the wrong people. I think that he owed whoever money, whether it was from gambling or from drugs or from running drugs. Something happened. From the Dark Side interview, and even Jeannie Clark, who was Lady Blossom at the time, the package of cigarettes on the table was a telltale sign, because Gino hated cigarette smokes. And whenever I say hated them, he would have never let someone in that even had cigarettes. If he thought you had cigarettes in your purse, you were out the door. He just hated them. And for someone to leave a pack of cigarettes on the table like that, that would have never been, he would have never allowed that. I think that Gino got involved with some bad people, and they killed him as like a message to anybody else. Like, if we can take care of him, just think what we can do to you.
And was that the thought back then? Like back then, I mean, looking back at it, maybe you have the hindsight view of looking at something. Maybe sometimes it's easier in, years later. At the time, did you guys think that somebody probably had something to do with Gino dying?
Well, whenever we got the autopsy, and there was they said that there was so much cocaine in his system, like in his stomach, that how does that get there? I mean, you don't swallow it. You don't, there's no way you can snort that much and have, whatever, I can't remember the accumulated amount that was in. Then that's not even what was in his bloodstream. This was just what was in his stomach. So to me, someone opened up his mouth and just poured it down.
I read that too, where the amount of cocaine he had was just human consumption, almost impossible to consume that much.
Your body would shut down before you get the rest of it down.
So what was it like then? You're with one of the hottest heels in the world, one of the greatest heels of all time, at least in my opinion. Looking back at him, Gino was, he was
good. I mean, he was so good. Yeah.
And the place was one of the hottest territories in the history of wrestling. I mean, it had to be an incredible time to be there.
It was. I mean, I got to do the Cotton Bowl. We did a really big show in the Cotton Bowl, just like a month after I'd gotten in the business. I got to do Reunion Arena, which was sold out, and worked after Terry Gordy and Killer Khan, and had a really good match then. It was dreamlike. I mean, going from a girl from West Texas going to college, and then you're traveling the road with world famous wrestlers and getting to do things like your mom used to do. And I was 24 years old, and it was the time of my life. And then it all like, I only had like 2 days left. It was Christmas Day and the day after because Sunshine had come back. And I knew what my time was short because it would be whenever, because Sunshine was in rehab at the time. And so I knew that, it wasn't going to be a long gig and just to make the most of it. But then I did Christmas Day and the day after in Florida, and that's when I saw Dusty. And then Dusty and Tully was actually looking for a perfect 10, looking for the perfect girl. And whenever they saw me walk in the dressing room, it was the next door opened up. I am so, so blessed to have been able to work with the very best at the very, very best time in wrestling. I'm so blessed. I am. I can't say it enough.
Yeah, the list of people you worked with, I mean, they were the absolute best in one of the best eras in wrestling history. I mean, you worked with some of the greatest heels, baby faces, all of them. That had to be just a blast, especially since you had never really been smartened up.
Really? Well, whenever I worked in World Class, our main rivalries were against the Von Erichs. So then I worked with Gino, Chris, Adams, and Jake. And, and we did a lot of like the 6-man tags and tag teams out of that. So working with Chris, Jake, and Gino, and then going and working with the Mid-Atlantic with Tully, who's a superb heel. Cannot get any better than Tully. Just for being the so good on the mic and such a good champion and someone that Dusty worked almost every night for a whole year against him. So if you can work against Dusty like that, I mean, you're really working. And so, to work with Tully and Dusty and Magnum and Flair, and then getting to work, like being the Warlord's very first manager and Rock and Roll Express and Midnight Express. I'm a lucky girl.
Also, you're talking about the great talent you worked with. When you decided you wanted to get in the ring, you also went to one of the greatest trainers of all time, one of the best workers, Nelson Royal.
Yes. And what's so cool
for
is
many years.
My dad worked a lot with him, Nelson. I didn't know until I was out of the business and like years and years later, probably about 5 or 6 years ago, that I started looking up all the old cards of like how much Nelson worked the Amarillo territory and worked Texas and New Mexico. So he was already like really good friends with my dad. So it was so cool. And then to work up there and go the whole summer and work with Robin and my sister-in-law and then she got with WWF and turned to WWE, but was her champion, and it was so cool. It was really good.
I saw an interview.
Oh my God, Nelson made me throw up several times. It was so hot.
I saw also that one of the students there was a young Ken Shamrock.
Yes, wow. Ken Shamrock was up there, and Rockin' Robin, and then Nelson's daughter Shannon, who went as Shasha, was also training up there with us. Yeah, but Shamrock was up there. Wow. Took a lot of bumps for us.
And I missed it. What city was that? Were you training in with Nelson? I'm sorry, I missed it.
It was in Mooresville, where Nelson still got a store up there. His son has taken over. But it's Mooresville. It's just on the other side of Concord, going outside of Charlotte.
It's right there by Lake Norman, where all the NASCAR drivers built these things. And
yes.
Nelson bought this property back in the 70s because I was there when they first got it. And I rode in a couple of. Johnny would love this place. It's an old Western store, authentic Western store. I mean, with all the old tackle and attack and all that stuff. And at the side of it had a regulation size rodeo arena with the grandstand. He used to have charity rodeos out there, and I rode my first Brahma bulls out there for Nelson.
Had 18 acres back there.
Yeah, it was quite a place, and it's still in business today.
They've actually built the interstate around it. Whenever they were making I-77, I think it was 77 bigger. The store is still there, and they did the overpass over it.
Yeah, wow.
Where did you find Warlord? I mean, not that you found him, but where did he come from? I remember when he came in, he was so freaking enormous. I mean,
he was scary. He was scary to us. He must have been terrifying to you.
Right. He's from Minnesota. He's from like where the Road Warriors and Nikita and Darso, where all they up in that group. They came in from Minnesota.
And when he came down to Carolinas, was that his first run that he had down there with you?
I believe so. Yes, he had just broken in, having his very, very first matches. Came down to Kiss's War Machine. It was quite a set, and guy was huge. And
Massive.
then he was constantly eating. And then what was really funny was he drove a red Fiero. And if you know what a Fiero is, it's a very tiny car. And for
Right.
him to climb out of that car was amazing. But he loved it. He absolutely loved that car.
When I trained with Brad Reinges up in Minnesota, and the gym up there, had all these
Yeah.
guys back in the early '90s, late '80s that bench pressed 500 pounds. It was some type of factory. So
Wonder what they put in that food.
oh my
There
God.
was some monsters up there.
And I saw Warlord. He had 320 on a bar, which is kind of unusual because you had 3 plates and then a 2.5, which means you're very meticulous about your weight. And which I thought
Every
that guy's
ounce counted.
That's right. He had a 2.5 extra weight, 3 big plates, and he pulled it off and walked back with it. I thought, what's he doing? He bent over, did some rows, picked it back up, walked back, and put it back. And I thought, I'm getting in the wrong business. That guy is a freak. Nicest guy in the world. Thank God.
Warlord and Barbarian on the same team. That's amazing.
Kevin Nash used to say, he says, if you don't know how many bumps I'm going to take, look at Warlord and go backwards. Which when those two guys came in, it was something. So back in the Carolinas, and you left from Texas, which was hot as it could be, and you were in the Carolinas when it was at its absolute peak. I mean, that had to be fun rolling with Dusty and Tully and the guys up there. That place was on fire.
It was, and it was really cool because whenever I had my shows in Florida and I'd gone over to talk to Michael Hayes because Michael Hayes was booking at the time. He actually said, go talk to Dusty. Dusty, and I remember to this day, says, Dusty's getting ready to blow the Carolinas up. Okay. So even then, people knew like Dusty was getting ready to do something in the mid-Atlantic area. And he did. I mean, it was, we had 2 and 3 nights every single night for a couple of years. People made money. We were happy. Everybody was getting along. It was definitely a good time. Super, super time.
What were you thinking during that time? Because Vince McMahon, starting to take over with WWE, and the Carolinas is kind of the last stronghold against WWE, maybe taking over the whole country, then the world. Were you aware of all this going on at the time, that there was this zero-sum game of somebody trying to take over?
Yeah, because when we were going into Baltimore and Philadelphia, we were going in their backyard and they were coming over in our yard. It was definitely, I want to say we were almost at war, because it was like who was going to win the battle, because we were doing really well in Philadelphia and Baltimore and kind of spreading out, but you didn't want to do too much at one time, but you definitely didn't want to give up the stronghold that you had. And then we had like being able to buy the Gulfstream and the Learjet, so the money was being made. We lost on marketing. I think that if Crockett's had taken marketing with the merch a lot more serious, the wrestling certainly was a product, but when we were laughing because they came out with a wrestling ring, like, haha, they're not going to say who's going to buy a wrestling ring and who's going to buy little dolls. And they sold like 1 million in 3 weeks. We were like, oh, we might want to get on a different page.
Yeah.
The Crockett's definitely had the product, and they had the idea, and they had the work ethic, and they had everything going for them. But I think with the merch and taking wrestling to that next level, because WWE took wrestling and made it a household normal thing to do, rather than, oh, you watch wrestling. Okay. And everybody was watching wrestling. It just made it more socially acceptable to be a wrestling fan.
Right. I don't want to bring up anything bad, and if it is bad, just ignore it. We'll go to something else. But I read online, which it must be true because it's online, that you had some issues working because you were married to Sam Houston and he was working in a different territory. Was that true?
Yeah. I mean, well, because kayfabe was so strong, they didn't want their talent sitting in the audience of the rival. And I didn't think anything of it. I would go up there like really had my regular clothes on and didn't. I get recognized sometimes, but it wasn't like I never meant to get attention, I'd sit up in the stands and usually read a book or something. And but because kayfabe was still very sacred at the time, and it almost was sacrilegious for me to go to another show. But all I was doing was supporting my husband and going to another event. I didn't see anything wrong with it, but they obviously did.
So that was the problem they had, was when you went up to visit your husband, that you went to the show and that they didn't like you doing that.
Right. They didn't like us being married in the first place. Whenever I first got married to Sam in 86, they shipped both of us to Kansas City. And basically we starved. It was like 500-mile road trips, and we get paid $30. And we were lucky enough to where Sam and I, we shared an apartment, we shared expenses, we made the trips together. But the guys that were up there on their own, like Warlord and Barbarian and George South and Mitch Snow and those guys, they literally were starving. And so we packed up and went to Dallas. But yeah, they literally starved us out in 86. And then when I came back with Zabisco in 87 and part of 88, it was definitely, they let me know that they were not happy with me going up there to the shows. And then we did the big angle with Dusty and the envelope, and they just ended it because that's the power that they had.
And when you say they shipped you to Kansas City, was that the Crockett that shipped
It
you?
was going to be Crockett's like team. It was like almost like a minor league baseball team thing. Like you've got the guys warming up in another territory ready to come in, and then that way they're working and building angles, and you got control over them. Well, that's what Kansas City was supposed to be like. Was like a satellite office, but Kansas City had been hurt so bad by the previous promotion because they kept running the same guys, and they really weren't promoting at the time. And then to have new guys come in and kind of take over, it wasn't looked upon. So it was just meant to fail from the very start.
And then when you went back, you ended up being paired up with Zabisco. Again, another great heel.
Yes, a really good heel. We just did. Zabisco's good, but we just did not. I didn't have the chemistry that I did with Tully and Dusty and Flair. It just wasn't quite there. And to this day, I love the angle with the envelope and setting Dusty up, because even though we didn't do anything, it's still like the best angle ever because no one will ever know. No one will know.
I mean, what was you say no one ever know, what was supposed to be?
I really, to this day, I don't know. They had several things floating around, and I've got the envelope with what they gave me to carry, because I had asked the office, like if someone grabs the envelope and there's nothing in that kind of blows everything. I need to have something in the envelope. So the girls for the office put some stuff in an envelope so that I could carry it. And whenever I saw Dusty, I guess it was like 2005, maybe 2006, I was doing interviews, and podcasts hadn't come around yet, but I was doing like magazines and stuff. And people always ask, what's in the envelope? What's in the envelope? And so I asked Dusty, I said, what should I tell them? He said, never tell them. He said, because if you tell them, they'll never ask again. He says, if you never tell them, they'll always keep asking. And so 40 years later, y'all are still asking.
Isn't Dusty one of the most amazing individuals ever? Everybody who ran into Dusty will tell you a great story about my good friend Dusty Rhodes, because Dusty was a good friend to everybody, and he made everybody feel like you were his good friend. There's never been a guy like Dusty. He's influenced so many people, but everybody has a good story about Dusty.
It does. And then everybody talks about Flair on the mic and Flair being over. Well, Dusty's better because he can shoot a promo on anybody, and it's different. And then Dusty was so over, because I traveled with Dusty for almost a year, and just pulling up to the airports, pulling up to the hotels, pulling up everywhere. Dusty was so over. Everybody loved him so much. so much.
And,
And I'm
and
so
it
I'm
didn't
so happy to
matter.
see Cody doing well too.
Yeah, it didn't matter if it's a professional businessman or what. Everybody knew Dusty Rhodes Jr.
Okay, my Dusty Rhodes story. This is the greatest story ever. We used to have the matches in the Omni on Sunday nights.
Right.
And I love the Omni because there were offices that I could go back in and relax and have quiet time. They also had phones that if you dialed 9, you could get an outside line. And I could call my mom and dad and kind of chit chat for a little while. Hey, I'm in Atlanta. Everything's good. Well, so I'm like wandering around back in the hallways, and there's a man down at the end of the hallway, and he's walking towards me. So I'm like, gosh, he looks familiar. And I'm like, I knew him from somewhere, but I just didn't know where I knew. So as we get closer, I'm like, hey, how are you doing? And he says, I'm here to see the American Dream with Dusty Rhodes. And I'm like, wow. And then he walked by. I was like, holy, that's Hank Aaron. Hank Aaron had
Oh
come
my
to see
goodness.
Dusty
That's
Rhodes and was
huge.
walking in the back of them. And here, there's no camera. I don't have cell phone. There's no like nothing. And I'm like,
Yeah.
and there's no way I could tell.
So I tell you a
story.
Dusty Rhodes story we're in New York City, and my wife is taking me to this party with some really famous guys who run banks and financial institutions. My wife said, just so you know, he's pretty buttoned up. It may be boring. I said, okay, no big deal. So I'm sitting there and nobody said anything. It is kind of boring. Finally, one of the guys there who's worth several $1 billion, it tells me, he says, Dusty Rhodes. And the first time he said something to me, and I said, yeah. And he says, do you know Dusty? I said, he's a good friend. And he stops the party. He goes, holy shit, he knows Dusty Rhodes. I mean, these guys have lunch with Warren Buffett.
Love
They're
it.
blown away that I knew
That
Dusty
you know
Rhodes.
Dusty.
And all they want to do is
That's
tell us
great.
some Dusty stories. Tell us some Dusty stories. He
That's awesome.
influenced so many people. It's just an amazing life that he had.
It's a
Right.
true American dream, though. I mean,
Right. And I love what is it, the little memes that they come up with, the little bits that they steal from his promos. I get those in my Twitter feed all the time. I love it. His promos are so good.
So did you ever during that time? I know you went up to WWE, but did you want to stay? Were you disappointed with it? How was the experience with WWE?
I had gone up. I was actually on a road trip to see Sam, and Grizz was there, and Robin, and we're all just just big family reunion and traveling around. And Sam said that, hey, Leilani's here. Why don't you get your gear on and go take some bumps out in the ring? She wants to work out with you and see how your training is going. Shoot, yeah. So I get my stuff on. I go out in the ring, and I've known Leilani for forever. So I'm just in there, just having a good time and, taking some bumps and, just everything's good. Well, then I noticed like Robin goes and takes some bumps with her too. So I'm like, well, I didn't think anything out. Well, it was actually a tryout. No one had told me it was an actual tryout that WWE or WWF at the time was like watching me. Like, so it would have been nice if someone told me. But the good thing is that Robin, got the spot. Robin was able to have such really good matches with Sherry Martel. There for a long time, it was Jake and Robin and Grizz and Sam and myself were all traveling together. So it was a big family, just party all the time. We got to see everybody, constantly, especially with Sam being on the road. And I was working for Piedmont Airlines at the time. I could go out and fly out and see everybody on TV. So it all worked out. It was all good. It was meant to be, what I'm saying? I don't think I was ever what the WWE looked for. They said I was too regional, that I was too Southern, that I wouldn't have a mass appeal. But I look at how much I changed from being Andrea, the Lady Giant, to being Baby Doll, and then working with Zbyszko. I mean, I can change. I'm a chameleon, and it would be just whatever they wanted. They just didn't see what they wanted.
Yeah, the Southern thing, it never worked. You can ask Stone Cold, and you'll never get over with a Southern accent.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of diversity, you could do you're like a chameleon. You also have another talent that you don't get quite as much praise for. You probably should, and that's your ability to make wardrobes. You made a lot of wardrobes for Jake and a lot of other guys. I
did.
Doing the research is so wonderful because we learned so much about our guests. And tell us a little bit about that part of your lifestyle. Because at the time, I think there was only one other. Johnny Weaver's wife was making similar stuff, right?
Right. Oh yeah, Johnny Weaver's well, not
Not
Johnny Weaver,
Johnny Walker. Johnny Walker. I'm
Johnny
sorry.
Walker, yes. The guys were needing stuff done, and I noticed that stuff was falling apart. They had Can H too in St. Louis, so you had like Johnny Walker's wife doing robes, and then you had Can H. So, but there's only so much you can do, and then spandex was coming out, and MTV, and the whole thing, and everything was changing a lot. I did gear for like the Dynamic Dudes, which was Johnny Ace and Shane Douglas. I did a couple singlets for Steiners. I did Dr. Death's The Long White Robe with the red flames and the skull on the back. I did that was
awesome.
that was his Japan robe. That was like my stellar. I did a bunch of tights for Jake. I had over 200 guys at one time I was sewing for. And it was really cool because I was working for Piedmont Airlines, and WWE was having their TVs every 2 weeks. So I would fly out, get all the measurements, get what they wanted, then go home. And we had Mary Jo's, which was in Gastonia, and I could go buy all the material and sew for 2 weeks, and then go out, meet everybody, and then make deliveries, and then come. I even did Dusty's polka dots, his very first set of polka dots.
Yeah, I want to get into that. I want to get into that whole story here in a second.
And so I did Flair's Black Scorpion because it was a secret and they didn't want anybody to know. So Flair came over to my apartment twice so he could get measured and then fitted. But I was like the only one who knew who the Black Scorpion was because I did the outfit. But yeah, like 200 guys. And then it all kind of came to an end because I was talking to Dusty about, getting some more because he was wanting some jackets, and, WrestleMania had come and the whole thing. And the next time I came out, he was just like, Vince is going to take over the costuming. And he says, I can't have you make my stuff anymore. And it broke my heart because I was like, I was doing so well and I love seeing everybody. And it just, Vince took it away from me. But then the girls that Vince got, oh, they did such a good job. So I can't bitch when someone does so well,
Yeah. So the Dusty with the polka dot, what did he come to you and say, I got this thing, I want to make it work? Or how was that approach to you?
It was, Dusty liked it to the extent because if Vince didn't like you, he didn't do anything with you. But if
I'm
glad
you said that because Dusty loved those polka dots.
He did, and
a lot of people think he hated them and all that, and that was never true. I mean,
oh no, and it was just because Vince was using them, and Vince was putting them over, and Vince was giving them a spot to shine, and it didn't matter if you gave Dusty a flour sack; he was going to get that flour sack over.
Exactly.
So that's big news now because people have always said Dusty hated him. Of course, I wasn't there. I just heard the rumors. You guys were there. Dusty did not hate the polka dots.
No.
He liked them.
Yeah.
It was another way for him to say, oh, you're going to give me this? Watch me. I'm going to put it over. You know how people say that, oh, I can put a broom over? Well, Dusty put the polka dots over.
Well, his theme song was the best ever, too. I mean,
yeah, Working Man, yes. And then he had Sapphire, and Sapphire absolutely loved him. So, I mean, here you have, the perfect, sorry, I had to readjust, combination because Sapphire absolutely loved Dusty. And then I gave Sapphire
what a lady she was, too, by the way.
I gave her my gold lame jacket to wear at WrestleMania, the one that I wore with Flair all the time. The gold jacket that she wore, I actually gave it to her to wear. So there's a little heritage there. But yeah, she was super. And though I miss Dusty so much, I miss him at like the Fan Fest and reunions and things like that because he loved the fans. He loved seeing all of us. It was just really miss him. But I do get to see Michelle. I get to see Michelle and Teal a couple of times a year because they get to do events. So I get to see Michelle, and she's a sweetheart.
Yeah, yeah.
So I tell you Dusty's story. I think we were in Lubbock. I think it was Lubbock. We were riding to the ring on a horse, and Vince called me. I grew up working on a ranch. I hadn't been on a horse in a long time, but I've been on a lot of horses. And he goes, "Can you ride a horse?" I said, "Sure." And so he got this horse, and he goes, he wants me to, but they wanted to rehearse it to see if the pyro scared the horse. Because obviously you're gonna have the crowd there, but you're gonna have some pyro too. So I get on this horse, but I don't know it's shoed. So I'm walking with a horse backstage to come front, and it's on rubber stuff. Well, when it steps on the concrete, I don't know the horse's shoe because I thought surely they weren't dumb enough to give me a shoed horse on concrete.
Oh, it's gonna slip.
So when the horse steps on the concrete, its legs just go out from under it. And I've got my foot stuck in the stirrup and I can't get off this freaking horse.
Is that 330 damn pounds that made that horse fall down?
Yeah, maybe it's my big fat ass that made it fall. So
that's right.
The horse goes down, starts kicking those black boxes that were in the back everywhere. I'm stuck on the horse. It comes back up, and I'm still on the freaking horse, and I can't get loose of this thing. So finally, it goes down again, and I'm trying to get off of it. And Dusty Rhodes and Hunter, Triple H, the only ones that can see me because they're sitting in the empty seats talking, and all Dusty yells is rodeo, rodeo, rodeo. He thinks it's the funniest thing ever, watching me die by this horse.
Oh yeah.
So Vince then comes back and he sees this horse. The horse's leg was cut. He goes, "What'd you do to that horse?" The horse almost killed me. Dusty thought it was the funniest thing ever, watching a horse almost kill me.
Oh Lord! And then you're doing everything not to be killed.
I'm doing everything I can not to be killed, and all Dusty's yelling is rodeo. Of course, I guess it really couldn't do anything to help me, but I kind of wanted some sympathy more than I wanted anything else.
Speaking of Dusty, you and him did something that now, if you try to do it nowadays, you'd both be barred and banned for life. When Dusty slapped you, what that thing? What a reaction you got, and what Dusty follow-up promo to that was just superb. And
it was one of those things I had just. And when you look at like how soon that it happened, like right after I got into the Crockett territory, this was like just 2 months. Probably like 6 TVs in, and Dusty wants to do the deal where I stand up for Tully and I smacked Dusty, and then he, out of reaction, smacks me back. And so
was there any concern when you guys were planning that? Was there any
yes, Dusty, because it was just like, well, wonder if this turns you heel, and Dusty was just like, no, she's got control of this. He had so much faith in me that whenever he hit me, that there was no way, because that could have very easily turned him heel. Like everybody could go, what the fuck is he doing? Like, why is he hitting a woman, especially her? You know what I'm saying? But I had so much heat at that point that it wasn't until recently, because of YouTube and because we were so busy back then. I had boxes and boxes of VHS tapes because I just taped stuff, but I never had time to watch it. So now with YouTube, I get to go back and kind of like study stuff. Whenever I watch that, I watch the crowd. And when women are standing up and going, hit her again, and they've got the cigarette hanging out of their mouth and the cold drink, and they're, for a woman to yell at a man to hit another woman again, that's serious. That is serious. And I look at it this way: in 1985, I had more heat than any woman ever in the history of professional wrestling.
You did.
Wow.
Yeah.
Toward the end of the Crockett era, what I read again online, so it's got to be true. In fact, Abraham Lincoln said, if you read it on the internet, it's got to be true. So I read that on the internet.
Abe said that.
Abe Lincoln said that, and he's honest Abe. So if Abe said it, it's got to be true. But I read that when you had your second child, I believe it was, that's when you decided to get out of the business. You had all this heat. Did you regret leaving when you were so hot?
It was difficult. It really was. But I wanted to be a really good mom. And that was like my calling to life. Was if I didn't do anything right, I was going to be a good mom. So I couldn't be a good mom and I couldn't be baby doll at the same time. So it was very humbling to go back to Lubbock, Texas. And basically I had $100 and a plane ticket and a 1-year-old and was pregnant, and I started all over. And even though I've done some really cool stuff and gotten to work with the very, very best of the best, being a mom to Mike and Michaela has been the very best thing I've ever done. And I have no regrets giving it up at all. I don't regret trying to be the Sunny Delight mom. I don't regret living off from $600 a month for 5 years because I wanted to take care of my girls. And I couldn't figure out a way to have a job and not pay someone everything I made to take care of my kids while I worked. So I lived in basically a 2-room cottage for 5 years just so that I could take care of them and be their mom and fix them breakfast and lunch and dinner and go to the library and just we had a really tough life, but it was a very good life. And being a mom is the very best thing I've ever done. So
wow.
No regrets at all.
That's all. Tell us, as mom, being a mom, how was your mom? I mean, your mom watched your career throughout your how many years did she get to enjoy your career? And
My mom my mom lived to be 90. I went to her 90th birthday. My youngest daughter actually flew me out for my birthday to go see my mom on her 90th birthday.
Wow.
She was in a nursing home at the time, but I got to spend the whole day with her and she was sharp. Oh my gosh, this was right before COVID hit. So I was able to fly out there and spend the day with her at the nursing home because if I'd waited 2 weeks, I would have never been able to go in the nursing home. My mom was very strict. She's German heritage, the youngest of 5 girls, grew up Depression, Minnesota on a small farm. Whenever people live frugally, my mom knew how to squeeze a penny till it screamed. So that's how I learned a lot of my thriftiness and to how to garden and the whole thing. I learned a lot from my mom and I'm very blessed. She was tough.
What was her opinion on your career?
I knew I had won her over whenever I went to go see her one time, and she had bought a couple of wrestling magazines and had put them on the den wall with little thumbtacks. She had put my little poster, so I knew that was like the most famous thing I ever did was whenever I knew I was over with my mom.
Wow.
Maybe I've always wondered, with people that were, really got the business, I mean, when I say got it, they understood, how to be character and they loved the crowd. You said you loved the wrestling business. Mm-hmm. So hard for so many to walk away. That's why guys are always talking about last matches or talking about maybe one more run. That's always the old wrestlers thing. I've got an idea. Did you get the itch after you'd been gone? You have this great brain for wrestling. Did you ever get the itch to coach, to teach, to do anything else again as your children got older?
Well, I was out of the business until probably 2002, 2003. Whenever I did a show for Sal Corrente in Tampa, they had a wrestling reunion and I went to the ring with Jeff Jarrett against Tully. And so the Fan Fest and the legend shows and everything were just starting then. It wasn't until 2005, I believe, I did a show in the capital city for Legends Fan Fest, and that I was just wow, I need to move to North Carolina and get back in the business because my girls were older. My daughter actually traveled with me for about 10 years and did my merch table while I did appearances all up and down the East Coast from 2006 to 2015. And then she started wrestling because she just went in the ring and started doing bumps. And she's been wrestling, 14 years now, 10 years. Yeah, 10 years. And loves it. So once you're in it, it's kind of like those last matches. I just did a big show in Ohio 2 weeks ago. I did a local show in Boiling Springs, South Carolina last weekend. I've got New Jersey coming up in May. I've got a show with my kids in Utah in June, Texas in July, and then the Gathering in August. So it's with the Fan Fest and the Legends things, it's kind of like you get to do shows and do events and still keep going, and I love it. Just absolutely love it. The business changes, so why not change with it?
Have you helped your daughter, obviously, in different facets of the business and her career? Guided her?
That's one thing. I've made some gear for her, and that's about as far as I'll go. I figure wrestling is like teaching someone that you love how to drive. Don't do it. Because
Hey,
if you're going to train someone how to wrestle, they're going to hate you. Because from what I've learned, from a small child, you teach yourself not to fall. And with wrestling, you teach yourself how to fall and fall really hard. And that goes against everything in your brain that you've been taught. So you actually end up hating the person that's training you. It's just like the person that teaches you how to drive. You're going to end up hating them. So it's just better just to hire someone to go do it. So Michaela was very fortunate to be able to get in the ring with a lot of people and train and do bumps and learn a little bit from here and a little bit from there and a little bit from another person. And now that she's with Billy Corgan at NWA, we're kind of able to put it all together. But no, I would not. I don't know. See, I didn't take bumps, and she's in there taking bumps, and I can't put two moves together to save my life. You can tell me what to do, but I couldn't put a match together like what she does. She's just taking it to a different level. So no, I would not tell my daughter no. I'll have someone else tell her. I'll have someone else tell her what to do.
No advice on promos or no advice on anything?
I'll tell her that she looks pretty and her makeup looks nice. But that's really for someone else to do. That's really for someone else to do. I'm not hiring her. I'm not coaching her. Being a wrestler is your own thing. It's your, and yes, you can be second and third generation, but she's the one that's taking the bump. She's the one that's got the mentality of how to pull the crowd in. That's for her to learn. And I've taught her everything else up until then. She can learn from someone else that's much better than I am.
You know, Bob Orton told me
Are you proud that she's in the business?
Oh, I love it. She's, I do. And now that I'm making her gear and doing some other stuff for her, oh my gosh, that girl, for like 2 years, she was going to school full-time for college. She owned a Sonic, not just worked for a Sonic. She owned a Sonic, wow. And she was doing wrestling shows every weekend. Wow. So yes, I admire her to the moon and back.
You know, Bob Orton was one of my first tag team partners, and he told me the same thing about Randy. Not that Randy needs any help whatsoever, one of the greatest of all time. But I asked Bob one day, I said, do you ever give advice or anything? He said, nope. He goes, of course, you know, Randy's special, you know, like, but Bob was too. And he says, you know, unless he just asks, he said, I just don't interfere. I don't want to be the interfering dad. And I just want to let him figure out his way on his own. So that seems to be kind of similar in a lot of ways to fathers and mothers of wrestlers.
Whenever she asked, because we were down in Orangeburg, she was like, can I get in the ring and take some bumps? Can I start training? And it was just like, oh, okay. And she was like 14, maybe 15, but I think she was like 14. So it was like, okay. Well, like the next day, she is so sore that she can't even lift her head up off the pillow because she just like, and so are you all right? And she says, when can I work out next? When's your next show? And I just knew then that she had it. Because if you can take that where you're so sore and still want to get back in it because you know that you're going to get better, then there was no stopping her.
Well, Nicola, thank you so much for joining us. It's been when Mr. Brisco told me that he had you out there. This is wonderful. I'm so looking forward to it. Then, of course, doing all this history on you, and you're from God Bless, Texas, which is wonderful because it's better.
And it's like right up the road from where you were from, so that's even better.
About
so
90 miles. I've driven that 1,000,000 times. Is there anything that you want to promote, or social media, or anything for booking, or anything else?
Well, y'all can get a hold of me through either Facebook or Twitter. I am very socially active on there, much to the chagrin of my husband, but I love wrestling. I love the fans. I love hearing all the stories. I've got, like what I said, I've got New Jersey coming up in May. Then we're going out to Utah for Women's Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame. My daughter, Samantha Starr, and her husband, Dustin, are going to be there. Then we're in Lubbock in July, I believe July 17th. The first week of August is the gathering in Charlotte. I've got a show in Virginia in October, and then WrestleCade in November. So still busy. And then I've got my
Wow.
farm. I've got a 9-year-old. I've got a husband with 7 Harleys in our basement in our building. So it's busy. And then it's springtime, so I'm getting ready to garden. I've already brought some broccoli, and I bought celery. I've never raised celery before. And you can tell my chickens are ready to get out. So I've got things I got to do.
Tremendous. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Well, I appreciate it, and thank you for taking the time. Sorry
Well,
about
and
the fact that
hopefully one of these days I'll actually get to shake your head and hug your neck.
I hope so, because I grew up a big fan of yours, and
Well, good.
never gotten to meet you.
I know, right? And I've known the Briscoe family. We were talking about this for over 50 years.
Wow.
Wow. So Jerry,
I didn't know I was that old.
yeah, Jerry was just 60 when you met him.
I think it was 13. I think it was like
There you
13. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tigger, and maybe not for being there.
You're
and sharing your
welcome.
time
It's an
with us.
honor, a privilege. Thank you so much.